Ava Mitchell leaned back in the plush leather seat of first class, the hum of the jet engines vibrating softly through the cabin. Her dark, elegant hoodie blended seamlessly with the luxury of the surroundings, a striking contrast to the sharpness of the polished wooden surfaces and the champagne-colored curtains that framed the windows. She had earned every bit of this life, every seat she sat in, every success she enjoyed. Yet despite the comfort of the moment, her mind was always in motion. The CEO of Blue Sky Airlines was never truly at rest. The flight from New York to London was long, but Ava knew how to make the best of it. She opened her laptop, scanned through her emails, and began making strategic decisions for the expansion of her airline. Blue Sky was rapidly becoming one of the largest airlines in the world, and she had no intention of slowing down. As she adjusted her seat to get more comfortable, the door to the first-class cabin opened with a soft whoosh. Ava barely glanced up, used to the constant flow of attendants and passengers in the business of air travel. But then she felt it, the shift in the air, the unmistakable tension. She looked up to find a tall man standing at the entrance of her row. His sharp jawline was set in a firm sneer, his eyes narrowed as if assessing her presence in this space. Ava recognized him instantly as David Harris, a flight attendant known for his well-groomed appearance and cocky attitude. He was the kind of person who loved power, even the smallest amount. His gaze flicked over her casually, too casually, before he took a step forward, blocking her aisle. "You don't belong here," David said, his voice laced with authority. "Move to economy." The words hung in the air, thick with judgment and condescension. Ava's heart didn't race. There was no panic. Instead, a small smirk tugged at the corners of her lips, a momentary flash of amusement. She had been through far worse in her career and life. The world might see her as a billionaire, but some people still couldn't wrap their heads around the idea of a black woman holding the reins of a global empire. She stood slowly, deliberately, her eyes meeting his with an unsettling calm. She didn't flinch at the order. There was no need for theatrics. Ava Mitchell didn't do theatrics. But as she began to rise, she felt the weight of all eyes on her, even in the private cabin of first class. Just as she stood, the intercom overhead buzzed, its shrill tone cutting through the tension. "This is your captain speaking," came the voice, smooth and unbothered. "Our owner is aboard today. Enjoy the flight." Ava felt a small jolt of satisfaction as she saw David Harris's face drain of color. His confidence faltered, replaced by something more primal. Fear. He swallowed hard, realizing the mistake he had just made. But Ava didn't give him the satisfaction of a confrontation. She simply turned toward the aisle, adjusted her hoodie, and made her way to economy without so much as a word or glance at David. Her calm demeanor, paired with the captain's announcement, was her form of payback. She sat down in the cramped seat of economy, her mind already moving past the incident. Ava settled into the tight seat, her hoodie now pulled low over her brow as she adjusted to the cramped surroundings. The hum of the jet engines beneath her was constant, the pressure of 35,000 feet pressing on her chest in a way that was no longer unsettling, but almost comforting. She didn't mind the downgrade, though it was a far cry from the luxury of first class. In a way, it reminded her of her humble beginnings, growing up in a cramped apartment with dreams that seemed impossible at the time. Now those dreams had manifested into something far bigger than anyone had anticipated, including herself. Her fingers brushed against the frayed armrest, feeling a sticky residue from a spilled soda. She didn't even flinch. Ava Mitchell had learned long ago to remain unbothered by the little things. Around her, passengers in economy were still adjusting, shifting bags, murmuring softly about the long flight ahead. The smell of recycled air and faint traces of cheap perfume filled the cabin, a stark contrast to the leather seats and delicate floral scents of the first-class cabin. As the plane leveled out, Ava leaned back, letting the seat cradle her tired body, her mind not so much resting, but strategizing. She could almost hear the next steps of her empire unfold before her. Her thoughts flickered back to the captain's announcement. It had been subtle, but powerful. Her assistant, Lena, was back in New York, already handling the media storm she knew would follow. David Harris might have thought he could bully her, but Ava was used to people underestimating her. For years, it had been her fuel, the reason she kept fighting when the odds seemed impossible. She had been doubted her entire life, from the streets of Brooklyn to boardrooms full of skeptical executives who could barely hide their disbelief that a black woman had climbed the ranks to lead a multi-billion-dollar airline. Ava's phone buzzed in her lap. A message from Lena popped up on the screen. "It's starting. The video's gone viral. You're trending everywhere." A quiet smirk spread across Ava's lips. She glanced up and saw the teenage girl sitting a few rows ahead of her, eyes wide, phone pointed in her direction. The girl's gaze flickered between Ava and the first-class curtain, her fingers tapping quickly on the screen. Ava knew exactly what was going on. David Harris's outburst had become a spectacle, and now she was the star of an unintentional viral moment. Despite everything, Ava remained unfazed, her fingers tapping rhythmically on her phone. She was calm, controlled, but her mind was already working, pulling the strings of the narrative in real time. The intercom buzzed again, and David Harris's voice sliced through the cabin. "Listen up," he snapped, his words laced with frustration, his tone booming over the speaker. "Whoever's causing trouble, stay put. I run this cabin, and I don't care who you think you are. Rules are rules." The words ricocheted through the cabin, but it was clear David was speaking to her. Ava could almost feel the heat of his gaze on her, but she didn't flinch. She simply continued scrolling through her phone, her face a mask of indifference. She caught the eye of the girl with the braids, who was now filming the scene. The girl's mother leaned in, whispering loudly enough for Ava to hear. "That guy's a jerk. Who does he think he is?" Ava's lips twitched, just a sliver of a smile. She leaned forward, her voice low but steady, like she was sharing a secret with the girl. "He's about to find out who I am." The girl's eyes widened, her phone tilting toward Ava's face. She stammered, "Wait, what?" But Ava was already tapping out a message on her phone, sending it to Lena. "Leak it now." Within seconds, the cabin buzzed to life like a disturbed hive. The man in the Falcon's cap sitting near the girl gasped, his phone lighting up with a notification. His face went pale as he showed his wife the tweet that had already gone viral. "Flight attendant just kicked Blue Sky Airlines billionaire owner out of first class. She's black, and he's clueless. Video incoming." The teenage girl's shaky video footage appeared next. Grainy but unmistakable. It showed David Harris sneering at Ava as she calmly made her way to economy, tagged with hashtags like Jonker Blue Sky Airlines, Jonker Justice for Ava, and John Racist Flight Attendant. The video was already gaining thousands of likes and shares, and David Harris didn't even realize how badly he had just backfired. Ava continued scrolling on her phone, her expression cool and collected. She'd known how to turn the tide in her favor. And now the entire cabin was buzzing with the aftermath of David's outburst, his words reverberating back at him. Ava's phone buzzed again, pulling her attention back to the unfolding chaos. Her assistant Lena's message was quick and to the point. "It's everywhere. News outlets, social media, even influencers are getting in on it. Your name is trending." Ava couldn't help but chuckle softly to herself. She'd known the moment David Harris had spoken those words that things were about to escalate. The media loved a story about a powerful figure being mistreated, and Ava's experience, the billionaire black woman being belittled by a white flight attendant, was exactly the kind of drama that would ignite the internet. She glanced at the row ahead where a few passengers were still covertly filming, their phones barely visible in their laps. Ava was the star of the moment, but the attention wasn't unwelcome. She had spent years building Blue Sky Airlines into one of the most profitable and respected airlines in the world. It wasn't by accident or luck. She'd fought her way through the corporate world, often ignored or dismissed for things as trivial as her gender and race. Now, she wasn't just the CEO of a global empire, she was an inspiration to millions. And as the incident on the plane exploded into the viral spotlight, Ava knew that she had the power to control how this story unfolded. It would be on her terms, not David's. He had no idea what kind of storm he had just stirred up. The flight attendants had noticed the stir in the cabin. Ava's move to economy had raised more than a few eyebrows, and now some of the passengers were whispering to each other. She could hear snippets of their conversations, confusion, disbelief, and a touch of admiration. "She can't be the owner," one voice said. "I thought the owner was some old white guy." The other passenger chuckled softly. Yeah, that's what I thought too. The realization was starting to sink in. Ava Mitchell was not some random, overzealous passenger trying to sneak an upgrade. She was the woman who owned the airline they were all flying with, and the video footage was starting to take on a life of its own. Ava leaned back in her seat and adjusted her hoodie. It was still uncomfortable being crammed into an economy seat, but she had a point to make. This was just a moment, one incident, one disrespectful encounter, but she would turn it into something bigger, something that would make the world take notice. She checked her phone again. The video had already been shared thousands of times. The hashtag #Justice for Ava was trending in multiple cities. The comments section was alive with people calling out David Harris and praising her for staying calm. But Ava wasn't interested in the praise. She had something more important to focus on: her next move. As the plane cruised through the sky, Ava's mind was already calculating her next steps. The chaos around her only fueled her determination. She wasn't just going to let this slide. David Harris had made a mistake, but the real battle was far from over. She knew the moment she stepped off this plane, the fallout would escalate into something bigger, something that could be leveraged to change the narrative in her favor. A few minutes later, the flight attendants began to circulate through the cabin, offering drinks and snacks. Mia, a flight attendant Ava had always liked, made her way down the aisle with her usual efficiency. Mia caught sight of Ava in economy, her face registering a brief flicker of surprise before she quickly masked it. Mia had known Ava for years, but seeing her now, in this position, was a stark reminder of the reality of the situation. David was nowhere in sight, probably hiding behind the curtains of first class, no doubt trying to process what had just happened. The realization was sinking in. He had humiliated a woman who could easily crush his career with a single phone call, and now it was too late to undo the damage. Ava wasn't about to let him off that easily. She tapped her phone again, sending Lena a quick message. Start digging. Get me everything on him. I want his record, complaints, everything. Make sure the media knows about his past. Lena's response was immediate. On it. The wheels were already turning. While the world was focused on the viral video, Ava had a different plan. She knew how to fight back, and she wouldn't rely solely on the internet's outrage to carry her. She had the power to expose David Harris for what he really was: an arrogant, discriminatory man who thought his position in the world made him untouchable. But Ava's strategy wasn't just about tearing down her enemies. It was about building herself up even more. This moment was a chance to take the narrative she'd been handed and control it. By now, the whispers in the cabin had intensified, and Ava could see the passengers glancing at her. The teenage girl who had filmed the video was staring at her now, eyes wide with awe and curiosity. The phone was still in her hand, the screen glowing as she watched the numbers tick higher. Ava gave the girl a nod, acknowledging her without saying a word. The girl seemed to understand, her eyes wide with the recognition that she was watching something important unfold. Ava's eyes flicked back to the front of the cabin, where David was now lurking behind the curtain of first class, no doubt preparing for some kind of damage control. He wasn't the only one who would have to deal with the consequences of his actions. Ava had a message to send, not just to David, but to anyone who thought they could underestimate her. Her phone buzzed again, and this time it was a message from one of her legal advisors. We've got his file. All complaints are in the system. It's worse than we thought. You're clear to take action if you want to move forward. Ava's lips curved into a small smile. It was time to bring the storm. Ava's phone buzzed incessantly, the screen lighting up with notifications. Messages from Lena, from her PR team, and, more than a few, from journalists already demanding statements. She ignored them all for now. The viral video of David Harris's public humiliation of her was making waves, but Ava was already thinking beyond the headlines. This was bigger than a single incident. This was about proving that she belonged at the top, no matter the color of her skin, no matter the ignorance of people like David. The plane hummed along at cruising altitude, but Ava couldn't help but feel the tension in the air. She was certain David was seething behind the curtains of first class, his mind spinning as he tried to piece together just how badly he had miscalculated. He tried to put her in her place, to force her into the lower cabin like she didn't belong in first class. But now the whole world knew who she was, and the world would see how she handled this. David's outburst hadn't just been an insult. It had been a misjudgment of the highest order. He assumed she was just another black woman, traveling in casual clothes who didn't deserve the luxury of first class. But the world was about to learn just how wrong he was. Ava stared out the window, the miles of blue sky stretching ahead of her. The air was smooth, but her thoughts churned like a storm. The moment David Harris had spoken those words to her, he had unknowingly sealed his fate. People like him, people who underestimated others based on race, wealth, or background, always made that fatal mistake. They thought their world, their small understanding of things, was all that mattered. But they were wrong. They were always wrong. Her eyes shifted to the back of the plane, where the teenage girl with braids was still filming. The girl's face was alight with excitement, a mix of admiration and awe in her expression. Ava caught her eye, offering a small nod. She could feel the weight of the girl's gaze, as though she could see straight through Ava, understanding the power of the moment, even if she didn't fully understand what it meant. The stir in the cabin hadn't died down. The buzz was growing louder. Ava Mitchell, the owner of Blue Sky Airlines, was no longer a stranger to anyone on this flight. Even the other passengers who hadn't yet put the pieces together were starting to catch on. A few rows ahead, two men were speaking in hushed tones. One of them glanced back toward Ava. She could hear snippets of their conversation as they tried to process the situation. "I heard the owner of Blue Sky is on this flight," one man said, clearly skeptical. The other responded, "But isn't the owner some old white guy?" The first man nodded. "Yeah, that's what I thought too. Guess we were wrong." Ava's lips twitched into a barely noticeable smile. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. They would figure it out. They would see that she was exactly who she said she was. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of Mia, the flight attendant. Mia was pushing a cart through the aisle, glancing over at Ava as she neared her row. Ava could see the flicker of surprise in Mia's eyes before she masked it, but Ava didn't look away. Mia had worked for Blue Sky for years, and while they didn't interact much on a personal level, Ava had always appreciated her professionalism. Mia stopped next to Ava's seat and offered her a warm smile. "Can I get you anything, Ms. Mitchell?" Ava looked up at Mia, her expression softening just a little. "I'm good, Mia, but I'm guessing you've heard what's going on?" Mia's eyes flicked to the front of the cabin, then back at Ava. She nodded, her voice lowering. "I've heard, and I'm sorry. That man, David, he's always had a chip on his shoulder." Ava nodded thoughtfully. She didn't need Mia to apologize for David's actions. It wasn't Mia's fault. It wasn't anyone's fault but David's. But Ava knew that Mia's quiet support meant something. People like Mia understood that when someone like David Harris came along and tried to make life harder for someone like Ava, the entire system had to be questioned. As the flight progressed, the atmosphere in the cabin only grew more charged. Ava could feel the curious stares from the passengers, the whispering that had now turned into a low hum of speculation. She had become the center of attention, whether she wanted it or not. Yet she stayed composed, her eyes focused on the task at hand. The wheels of her plan were already in motion. Lena had gathered all the information on David Harris, his complaints, past incidents, everything that could bring his arrogance to its knees. Ava knew the public was already behind her, and now it was time to make sure the people who mattered, the higher-ups at Blue Sky Airlines, knew exactly what had happened and who they were dealing with. A few rows ahead, the teenage girl with braids and her mother were still whispering among themselves. Ava overheard them as they exchanged opinions about the situation. "She's the owner? Seriously?" the girl whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "She doesn't look like what I imagined." Ava suppressed a smile. People always underestimated her. The world had a certain image of who should be powerful, who should be wealthy, and who should own billion-dollar companies. A woman of color, dressed casually and not fit into their preconceived notion of what an owner looked like, didn't fit that mold. But Ava had spent her life shattering those expectations, one accomplishment at a time. She could hear the girl's voice again, clearer this time. "I thought the owner would be like an old man in a suit, but she's so cool, so calm. I can't believe it." Ava's heart swelled just slightly, not with pride but with understanding. The girl didn't know it, but she was witnessing a moment that would stick with her. She would remember this flight for the rest of her life. And when she saw other women, other black women, in positions of power, she would know that it was possible, no matter what anyone else said or thought. Suddenly, David Harris's voice cut through the hum of the cabin. His voice was sharp, trying to regain control of the situation he'd so carelessly escalated. "Listen up, people," he barked over the intercom. "Whoever's causing trouble, stay in your seats. I don't care who you think you are. I run this cabin, and the rules are the rules. If you don't like it, stay quiet and let me do my job." The room grew tense, but Ava could feel the shift. It wasn't just the passengers who were uncomfortable now. David was the one under fire. People were beginning to see the cracks in his authority. He had tried to bully a woman who was out of his league, not just in terms of wealth, but in terms of class, grace, and experience. He had underestimated her, and now it was clear. David Harris wasn't going to win this one. Ava glanced at the girl again. Her phone was raised, the camera still rolling. The girl had caught the moment, capturing David's bluster and Ava's unshaken composure in perfect contrast. It was a snapshot of everything that was wrong with the world, and everything Ava stood for. She wasn't going to let David get away with this. As she reached for her phone, her thumb hovered over the message to Lena. "Get me everything we have on him. It's time to make his life hell." But then before she could press send, she paused. No, not yet. There was a better way to do this, a more public way, something that would make the entire airline sit up and take notice. Ava tapped out a quick text to her PR team. "Start drafting the statement, make sure it's clear who the real boss is here, and make it viral." The plan was taking shape. The next move was critical. She needed to position herself as the strong, confident leader she was, one who wouldn't tolerate disrespect from anyone, not even someone who thought they could throw their weight around in a first-class cabin. David's eyes were still darting nervously over the cabin, but he couldn't hide the unease that was growing on his face. The people around him weren't buying his tough act anymore. The buzz on social media was too loud, too powerful. His attempt to control the narrative was backfiring, and Ava had no intention of letting him recover. She leaned back in her seat, feeling the tension in the cabin slowly shift. It was no longer about an airline employee flexing his muscle. It was about the world watching a powerful woman turn an embarrassing moment into an opportunity for justice. And soon everyone would know exactly who Ava Mitchell was. The wheels of the plane touched down softly on the tarmac in London. But for Ava, the real turbulence had already begun. The moment the flight had landed, the flood of media attention intensified. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications, tweets, Instagram posts, news alerts, and messages from her legal team. But none of that could drown out the voice of the captain that still echoed in her head. David Harris had underestimated her, and now the world was watching. It was no longer just about a flight attendant making a mistake. It was about Ava Mitchell, the owner of Blue Sky Airlines, reclaiming her power. And she wasn't going to let it slide quietly. She was going to make sure everyone knew exactly who she was, and that no one, not even a flight attendant, could strip that away. Ava exited the plane, the usual hush of first class replaced by an excited murmur from the passengers. The girl who had filmed the incident was still nearby, her phone at the ready, capturing every moment. Ava couldn't help but notice the glint in the girl's eyes, a mix of curiosity and admiration. She wasn't the only one who had witnessed the shift. Ava could feel the eyes of every passenger as she walked past, their gazes heavy with intrigue. As she made her way through the airport, Ava's mind raced with thoughts of the next steps. Lena, her assistant, had already started the process of building the narrative. Ava had to make sure that everything was framed just right. She couldn't afford any missteps, not now. She had spent her entire career building Blue Sky Airlines, and one thoughtless moment from David Harris couldn't be allowed to unravel everything she had worked for. She stepped into the terminal, her heels clicking against the cold marble floor as she made her way toward the private car that was waiting for her. As the doors opened, she was met by Lena, who was already on the phone, barking orders at someone in the PR department. She barely looked up as Ava slid into the car, the door shutting behind her with a soft thud. "Lena," Ava said, her voice calm but steady. What's the status? Lena looked up, her expression a mix of determination and concern. We've already got the legal team working on it. The video's gone viral, Ava. It's everywhere. People are calling for David to be fired, and the story is spreading like wildfire. But we need to control the narrative before it gets too messy. Ava nodded, her eyes narrowing slightly. I want it all on record. David Harris needs to be held accountable for his actions. We make sure the world knows exactly what happened here, how he tried to put me in my place, how he thought he could bully me because of who I am. Lena smiled, a sharp, calculating look in her eyes. I'll make sure the message is clear. We're already drafting a statement for you. But we need to do more than just respond. We need to push back. Show them who's in charge. Ava leaned back in the seat, letting the noise of the terminal fade as her mind raced ahead. The car sped through the streets of London, and she knew that the media would follow her every move from here on out. But it wasn't just about the video or the public outrage. She wasn't interested in just getting David Harris fired. Ava had more to prove. She was going to take control of this moment and make it her own. The power was in her hands. She had always known how to turn a crisis into an opportunity, and this would be no different. Ava's phone buzzed again, interrupting the quiet hum of the car as it sped through London's busy streets. This time it was a message from her PR team. The video is trending worldwide. You're getting tons of support, but we're also seeing a lot of people questioning your response. We need a statement from you, ASAP. Ava's fingers brushed against the glass of the car window, her mind working quickly. The public's sympathy was growing, but there was still work to do. She couldn't let this incident become a sideshow or a spectacle. David Harris had made his move, but now it was her turn to move the pieces on the board. She wasn't about to let his petty attack define her. Get them ready, Ava said, her voice quiet but resolute. I'll do the statement myself. Let's take control of this narrative, once and for all. Lena nodded, her fingers already flying over the keys of her phone, setting things in motion. Ava glanced out the window as the car passed by iconic landmarks of London, but her focus remained on the task ahead. Blue Sky Airlines was in her hands. This was just another test. She'd conquered so many others to get to this point, and she wouldn't back down now. When they arrived at the hotel, Ava walked with a sense of purpose, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Inside, she was ushered straight into a private room where the cameras were set up, and a few trusted members of her team were waiting. It was time to make her statement, but more importantly, to send a message. The room went quiet as Ava stepped in front of the cameras. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and smiled briefly. This wasn't just about defending herself. It was about showing strength, control, and the kind of leadership that couldn't be shaken by ignorance. Good evening, Ava began, her voice smooth and steady. I'm Ava Mitchell, and I am the CEO and owner of Blue Sky Airlines. Today I had an experience on my flight that unfortunately many people in my community and around the world are all too familiar with. A flight attendant, David Harris, made an assumption about who I am based solely on my appearance. He thought I didn't belong in first class, and he was wrong. Ava paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. The cameras flashed, capturing every word, every glance. However, this is not just about one man's mistake, she continued, her eyes steady. This is about a larger issue, an issue that affects people every day. It's about assumptions made based on race, gender, and background. It's about systems that expect certain people to stay in their place, and it's time for that to change. Ava's words were clear, unwavering. She wasn't just telling her story, she was sharing her truth and making sure it resonated with every person watching, whether they agreed or not. This was a fight she had been facing her whole life, but now the whole world was listening. David Harris will be held accountable for his actions, she added, her voice firm. But beyond that, this moment is a reminder to all of us that the work doesn't end with one man. The work is about changing how we think, how we treat each other, and how we dismantle the systems that perpetuate discrimination. I will continue to fight, not just for myself, but for everyone who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong. As she finished speaking, the room was still. Ava didn't wait for applause. She didn't need it. She had made her statement, and now the world would be forced to reckon with it. But Ava knew that David Harris wasn't the only enemy she was up against. She had been through enough battles to know that this was just the beginning. There were bigger forces at play. And as the cameras clicked and the team packed up, she turned to Lena, who was already at her side, ready to take on the next challenge. "Let's make sure this goes everywhere," Ava said, "and let's find out everything we can about who's backing him." Lena nodded, her expression hardening. "Already on it, boss." Ava knew that the fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was in control. The battle against David Harris was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but she had turned the tables, and that, she knew, was only the start. Ava stood in front of the large glass window of her hotel suite, staring out at the bustling streets of London below. The weight of the past 48 hours was pressing on her chest, but she refused to let it show. The viral video, the media frenzy, the overwhelming public support, all of it had been a surprise, yet it hadn't distracted her from her goal. There was still a battle to be won, and it wasn't going to be easy. She'd spent years building Blue Sky Airlines into a global powerhouse. Every decision, every partnership, every challenge had been about growth, about pushing forward, about defying expectations. This moment, though, was different. David Harris's disrespectful stunt on the flight wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a symptom of something much larger. The media was still buzzing with stories about her confrontation on the plane. But Ava knew this was just the beginning. The video had spread like wildfire, but it also carried a certain weight, something that couldn't just be wiped away by firing a single employee. No, this was about a system that had allowed David to think it was okay to treat her, or anyone like her, with such disdain. Her assistant, Lena, had been working overtime to keep the narrative in check, but Ava could sense the pressure building. They had already begun to target David Harris, digging into his past, pulling out old complaints and grievances. But Ava wasn't satisfied with simply exposing him. She needed to make a statement, something that would show the world she wasn't just a victim of his ignorance. She was a force to be reckoned with. Lena had just sent her a text message. "I've got a lead on who's backing David." "It's worse than we thought. There's more at play here, Ava." Ava's fingers tightened around the phone. She knew this wouldn't be over until David Harris and his hidden allies were exposed. The media coverage was already shifting. People were starting to question not just David, but the systems and institutions that allowed people like him to get away with treating others as less than. But who was behind him? Who had the power to make this incident more than just a personal mistake? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. Lena stepped inside, her face a mixture of concern and determination. "We need to talk," she said quietly, her voice heavy with something unspoken. Ava nodded, setting her phone down on the glass table. "What's going on?" Lena's eyes flicked to the screen of her tablet, her fingers swiping quickly. "It's Victor Crane." Ava's heart skipped. Victor Crane was one of Blue Sky's major investors, a man she had always seen as a business ally. But he was also the kind of person who valued power above all else, and someone Ava had never fully trusted. Lena continued, her voice steady but laced with concern. "Victor's been pulling strings behind the scenes. He's been in contact with David Harris and is trying to manipulate the narrative. The story isn't just about you anymore, Ava. It's about him, too." Ava felt a sharp, icy jolt of realization. Victor was not just a businessman in her orbit. He was now a player in this game, and he wasn't going to let her come out unscathed. She had always known that a man like him, with his connections and influence, would have no problem manipulating the system to his advantage. But now it seemed like he had crossed the line from ally to adversary. Her gaze hardened as she turned toward the window again, the weight of the new revelation settling in her chest. Ava's mind raced as she processed the new information. Victor Crane had always been a player in the shadows, but now it seemed like he was fully invested in toppling her. It wasn't enough to manipulate the stock market, sit on the board of Blue Sky, and pull strings behind closed doors. No, now Victor wanted something more. A power play, one that could finally shake Ava from her position as CEO. She turned to Lena, her expression cold. "What exactly has he been doing? What's his endgame here?" Lena's fingers hovered over her tablet, scrolling quickly through the latest reports. He's been in touch with David Harris, even going as far as helping him get his story out. He's working to use this whole incident to destabilize your position. He's been leaking things to the media, painting you as a victim, and worse, making it look like you can't handle your own airline. It's all connected, Ava. The moment David Harris disrespected you, Victor saw an opening, and he's not letting it go. Ava's jaw tightened. She had always suspected that people like Victor, who were driven by ego and the thirst for control, would try to undermine her. But this was different. He wasn't just going after her for a position. He was threatening everything she had built. And David Harris, with his misguided arrogance, had just become a pawn in that larger game. What do we know about Victor's dealings with David? Ava asked, already shifting into strategy mode. Lena glanced at her tablet again, her eyes flicking over the data. It's been happening for months, maybe longer. Victor's been quietly backing him, getting him ready for something like this. He wants the power to pull the strings in Blue Sky Airlines, and if he can paint you as weak or ineffective, he'll have the chance. But we also found something interesting. Ava raised an eyebrow. What's that? There's evidence that Victor has been using his connections in the boardroom to influence the vote against you. He's working with other board members to position himself as the one to take over if you fall. Ava felt the floor beneath her shift. Victor was playing for the long game, and if he was successful, he wouldn't just be taking her seat. He'd be dismantling everything she had worked for. I'm not going down without a fight, Ava said, her voice unwavering. We need to expose him, fast. Let the world know that this isn't just about me and David Harris. This is about corporate manipulation, a system that's been rigged for far too long. Lena's eyes flashed with resolve. I've already started reaching out to journalists. We'll have everything ready for a statement, but we can't make it look like it's coming from us directly. We need allies in the press to take it from here. Ava nodded. Let's get to work. I want to make sure Victor Crane knows that I'm not his pawn and I'm not backing down. I didn't build this empire just to watch someone like him take it from me. The room was silent for a beat as Lena typed rapidly, making plans, coordinating contacts. Ava felt a familiar rush of adrenaline, the same rush she'd felt in boardrooms, in airports, and in the countless challenges that had come before her. She wasn't going to let Victor Crane or anyone else tear down what she had built, but the battle was just beginning, and it was going to take more than just a press statement to win. Ava paced the hotel suite, the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. The walls felt like they were closing in. She had always been in control, always 3 steps ahead of the game. But Victor Crane had thrown her off balance, and now she had to fight not just for her position, but for her entire legacy. The media was swirling with reports of David Harris's humiliating actions. But now, thanks to Victor, things had taken a darker turn. The public saw the injustice, yes, but they also saw the cracks. And in the world of billion-dollar companies, perception was reality. If the boardroom began to waver, if they started questioning her leadership, then everything she'd worked for could collapse in an instant. Ava stopped by the window and stared out at the city below. London was as bustling as ever, the streets packed with people going about their business. Yet here she was, fighting for everything she'd built. She wasn't a stranger to adversity, but this was different. Victor Crane had connections that stretched far beyond the confines of corporate America. He was a puppet master, pulling strings in the shadows, and it was clear that he wasn't going to stop until he had all the control. She glanced over at Lena, who was seated at the desk, scrolling through her tablet, eyes flicking from one document to another. The plan they'd put in motion was already underway, but Ava knew it wasn't enough to just expose Victor. The world had to see him for what he was, a manipulator, using his wealth and influence to control everything in his path. She needed to strike back hard. We need leverage, Lena. Something concrete, Ava said, breaking the silence. We need to expose Victor's dealings and his attempts to tear Blue Sky apart from within. Lena nodded, her eyes narrowing as she typed quickly. I'm on it. There are whispers about Victor's offshore accounts, some shady investments he's made that might tie him to people who want you out. If we can track that down and get the evidence out there, we can put him in a position where he won't be able to fight back. Ava ran a hand through her hair, her mind whirling with possibilities. She had been in tight spots before, facing down competitors who underestimated her, navigating through boardroom politics that were never as straightforward as they seemed. But this felt like something more. Victor Crane wasn't just any business rival. He was ruthless, and he was connected to a network that extended far beyond the boardroom of Blue Sky. Her phone buzzed, snapping her from her thoughts. It was a message from her legal team. We've traced some of Victor's financials. There's a large transfer to an offshore account in the last 48 hours. We need to dig deeper, but it's a good lead. Ava's lips pressed into a tight line. This was it, the first real piece of evidence they needed to unravel Victor Crane's grip on Blue Sky Airlines. But it wasn't just about exposing him to the world. No, Ava needed something more than just a scandal. She needed to cripple his power, take him down in a way that would leave him with no room to maneuver. Ava's mind was already working through the next steps. She had always been a master of reading the situation, understanding exactly when to strike and when to let her enemies think they were in control. Now the cards were in her hands. All she needed was the right moment. She stood up from the window and turned to Lena, who was still absorbed in her tablet. Start making calls. I need our top reporters on this. We expose Victor to the media in a way that they won't be able to ignore. The narrative has to be clean, precise, and devastating. I want them to question his entire operation, not just what he's done to me, but what he's done to Blue Sky. Lena didn't hesitate. She immediately pulled out her phone and began dialing. Ava walked over to the desk and picked up a report that had been left on the table, her fingers skimming the contents as she processed the latest intel. She needed to know everything about Victor Crane, every investment, every shady deal, every ally he had. But more importantly, she needed to make sure her board was still on her side. It was only a matter of time before Victor made his move to take over, and Ava wasn't about to let that happen. She had built Blue Sky Airlines from the ground up. It was her vision, her blood, sweat, and tears. She was the one who had turned it into an empire. If Victor thought he could just waltz in and steal it from her, he had another thing coming. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Jamal, her tech expert, who had been digging into Victor's digital footprint. Ava, we found something interesting. Victor's been using a series of offshore shell companies to funnel money into David Harris's accounts. It looks like he's been playing both sides for a while now. I'll send you the files. Ava's pulse quickened as she looked over the files that popped up on her screen. This was bigger than she had anticipated. Not only was Victor Crane trying to take over Blue Sky, but he was also involved in a web of financial manipulation, using people like David Harris to carry out his dirty work. The extent of his dealings was shocking. Offshore accounts, hidden investments, money flowing to people who could be bought. It was a scandal waiting to happen. Lena, get ready, Ava said, her voice sharp with determination. We have everything we need to take Victor down. This isn't just about defending myself anymore. It's about showing everyone that this kind of manipulation won't stand. I'm going to bring him into the light. Lena raised an eyebrow. You sure about this? This could get ugly, Ava. Victor has the kind of connections that can ruin people. He won't back down easily. Ava nodded slowly, her expression unwavering. I didn't back down when people told me I couldn't build this airline, and I'm not backing down now. Victor thinks he's untouchable, but he's wrong. I've played by the rules, but now it's time to change the game. Ava took a deep breath, her resolve solidifying. She had no intention of letting Victor Crane or anyone else dictate her future. She had fought her way to the top, and if she had to fight again to keep it, she would. The time for waiting was over. The pieces were falling into place, and Ava wasn't going to let anyone, no matter how powerful, stop her. Ava sat in her private office, the weight of the day's decisions heavy on her shoulders. The walls lined with awards, framed achievements, and photographs of her with colleagues and business partners felt like they were closing in around her. Yet the stillness of the room couldn't drown out the feeling that everything was on the verge of changing. The war she had been fighting with Victor Crane had escalated quickly. She had fought against corporate manipulation before, but this time felt different. This time, she wasn't just defending her position, she was fighting for her legacy. The media frenzy around David Harris and the viral video had given her an edge, But the real battle was behind the scenes. The board members who had been wavering in their loyalty to her were beginning to question her ability to keep Blue Sky Airlines in one piece. Ava had always known that success came with enemies, but now those enemies were circling closer. Victor Crane's influence was far-reaching, and she could feel his shadow creeping into every decision she made. The stakes had never been higher. Her assistant, Lena, had been working nonstop to track Victor's moves. It wasn't just about exposing him anymore. They needed to hit him where it would hurt the most, his bottom line. But to do that, Ava needed solid proof, and that proof was slowly starting to take shape. The offshore accounts, the manipulated investments, and the deals done in the dark. They were all beginning to unravel. But Victor was a master at hiding his tracks, and every time they thought they had him cornered, he managed to slip away. Ava picked up her phone and dialed Lena. She needed an update, needed to know how close they were to cracking this open. The phone rang twice before Lena's voice came through. "We've got something," Lena said, a tone of excitement in her voice. "The financial records are tighter than we thought, but we found a leak in Victor's network. A few of his key allies have started to back out. It's like they've gotten cold feet, and one of his contacts in the Blue Sky board has dropped a major piece of info. They're pulling away from him." Ava's pulse quickened. This was the breakthrough she had been waiting for. She had known that Victor couldn't control everyone forever. People like him always had a weakness, a place where they got too comfortable, a place where their greed outpaced their caution. And now they had it. "Where's the leak coming from?" Ava asked, leaning forward in her chair. Lena hesitated, then replied, "It's Jonathan Hayes. He's the head of Blue Sky's financial division. He's not directly connected to Victor, but he's been one of his silent allies on the board. It looks like he's starting to realize that Victor's playing a dangerous game. We've got a lead on an email exchange between them, and it's all about consolidating power at Blue Sky. If we can prove this, we've got the smoking gun." Ava smiled to herself, feeling a surge of energy. Jonathan Hayes had been a thorn in her side for years, one of the few board members who never fully trusted her. If he was finally seeing through Victor's game, this could change everything. "Get me that email," Ava ordered. "Now." "I'm on it. I'll send it over in the next hour," Lena replied. "This could be the piece that flips everything, Ava. You're going to take him down for good." Ava leaned back in her chair, allowing herself a moment of relief. This was it. The pieces were finally falling into place. But even as she thought she had Victor Crane cornered, a voice in her head reminded her that nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. Victor wasn't a man who played by the rules. He was ruthless, and he wasn't going down without a fight. Ava sat back, her fingers tracing the edges of the document on her desk. The tension in the room seemed to thicken with every passing second. She knew that this was her moment. If Lena could deliver the smoking gun, everything would change. Victor Crane wouldn't have anywhere to hide. But she also knew that Victor had always been 2 steps ahead, and he wouldn't give up without a final strike. As the minutes ticked by, Ava's phone buzzed again. It was a message from Lena. "Got it. I'll forward the email now. You're going to want to see this." Ava's heart raced as she opened the email. It was everything she had been hoping for, a clear thread connecting Victor to the manipulations within the company. An exchange of messages that proved Jonathan Hayes had been working with Victor to push for her downfall. The details were damning. Agreements, financial backing, and even threats that had been made to some of the board members. There it was, evidence of Victor's plans to usurp control of Blue Sky Airlines and ruin Ava's position. She read the email a second time, her mind racing. This was exactly what she needed. She could already imagine the headlines, the news breaking wide open. Victor Crane's empire of deception was about to collapse. But Ava knew she couldn't get too ahead of herself. They had to move quickly, strategically. One misstep, and Victor would find a way to counter it, just like he always had. Ava picked up the phone and dialed Lena immediately. "We need to take this public," she said, her voice firm. "But we do it on our terms. I don't want Victor to control the narrative. Get the legal team and the PR team on standby. We need to issue a statement as soon as possible." "I'm already on it," Lena responded, her voice sharp with determination. "I'll make sure it's bulletproof. I'm sending this email to the media first, and then we'll have our statement ready." Ava's eyes locked on the screen as she replayed the email one more time. Victor had made one fatal mistake. He underestimated her. He thought he could pull the strings from behind the scenes, controlling the fate of Blue Sky from a distance. But he didn't account for her resolve, her ability to turn the tide when things got too close. She knew this wouldn't be easy. The media would come after her. There would be questions, outrage, and the inevitable backlash from Victor's allies. But Ava had weathered storms before. This wasn't her first battle, and it wouldn't be her last. This time, she was going to win, and she was going to do it in front of the whole world. As she prepared to move forward, her thoughts turned to the people who had supported her along the way. Lena, her assistant and trusted confidant, who had never once doubted her ability to lead. Jonathan Hayes, who had finally realized the depth of Victor's manipulation. And the passengers on the flight, who had unknowingly become part of the story. Their support was the foundation of her strength. Ava's lips curved into a smile, the first genuine smile she had allowed herself in days. She could feel the weight lifting from her shoulders, but she also knew this was just the beginning of the real fight. Victor would fight back. He wouldn't go down quietly. But Ava was ready for whatever came next. With a final deep breath, she stood from her desk and walked to the window, her gaze once again sweeping over the city. London was bustling, alive with possibility, and so was Blue Sky Airlines. The battle was far from over, but now for the first time, Ava felt like she had the upper hand. Ava's phone buzzed incessantly as the media storm began to take shape. The message notifications were relentless, each one carrying a fresh wave of attention or backlash. Headlines screamed her name, both in praise and condemnation. The viral email had already made its rounds, revealing the shady dealings of Victor Crane, and the world was beginning to see him for what he truly was. But Ava knew this battle wasn't won yet. The storm had only just begun. Ava sat at her desk, the quiet hum of the office a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Lena was pacing in the corner, her fingers constantly typing and swiping across her tablet as she monitored the situation. Despite the pressure, Lena had always been a steady force. Ava needed her now more than ever. "We've got coverage on all major outlets. The media is eating this up," Lena said, her eyes flicking to Ava. "But Victor is already making moves. He's threatening to counterattack with a PR campaign of his own." Ava's gaze sharpened. She had expected this. Victor would never sit idly by while his empire crumbled. He would fight back, clawing his way through any tactic to regain control. It was always about power for him. "Let him," Ava said, her voice cool, yet laced with a quiet determination. "I'm not backing down. We've got more than just a story now. We've got evidence. He's on the ropes. But we need to strike fast." Lena nodded, her fingers flying over the tablet. "I've already set up the meeting with the press. I've contacted key reporters who will focus on the facts, what we've uncovered about his offshore accounts and the people he's been manipulating. But Ava, we need to watch the board closely. Jonathan Hayes may have turned on him, but not everyone on the board is in your corner." Ava felt a flash of frustration. Jonathan Hayes was supposed to be an ally, someone who had finally seen through Victor's lies. But she knew all too well how power and money could corrupt people. A few whispers from Victor could easily sway others on the board. She couldn't let that happen. "I need to make sure the board knows exactly what's going on. They need to hear it from me, not through the media or through Victor's spin. I'm calling an emergency meeting." Ava stood up, the decision final. "This ends now. I'm taking back control." Lena paused, looking at Ava carefully. "Are you sure? This will be a public spectacle. Victor will do everything he can to drag your name through the mud. It won't be easy." Ava didn't hesitate. "I didn't get here by running from the fight, Lena. I'm ready for whatever comes next." As Lena made the necessary arrangements, Ava took a moment to collect her thoughts. She knew she had to act fast. The world was watching, but it wasn't just about Victor and his cronies anymore. It was about the future of Blue Sky Airlines, her company. She had fought too hard to let it fall apart over a few power-hungry individuals. But she also knew this would be the final confrontation. The stakes had never been higher. One wrong move, and she could lose everything. The conference room was silent as the board members filed in, their faces a mix of uncertainty and curiosity. Ava stood at the head of the table, her posture straight, her presence commanding the room. She could feel the tension building, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was her chance to take back control, to show them who was really in charge. Lena entered with a stack of documents in her hands and without a word, passed them to the board members. They flipped through the pages, scanning the detailed records of Victor Crane's financial manipulations. The evidence was irrefutable. Offshore accounts, shady transactions, and the hidden dealings that had been orchestrated behind closed doors. Victor had been playing them all for fools. Ava took a deep breath before speaking, her voice firm and clear. I called this meeting to address the current crisis, she began. But more importantly, I'm here to address the bigger issue, the manipulation of this company by one of our own, Victor Crane. She paused, watching as the board members exchanged glances. Some were already shifting uncomfortably. Others looked like they were still processing the shock. But Ava had no time to waste. She pushed forward, her words steady, calculated. I've spent the last few days gathering information, speaking with those who have come forward, and looking deeper into the financial operations of Blue Sky. What we've uncovered is disturbing. She motioned to the documents in front of them. Victor has been funneling company money into personal accounts, making backdoor deals with external investors, and manipulating the board to push his own agenda. Ava could see the shift. A few members were no longer looking at their phones, their attention fully on her. Jonathan Hayes shifted in his seat, his face pale as he avoided her gaze, knowing he was implicated in the scheme. Ava wasn't surprised. She had suspected him for a while, but now it was clear where his loyalties had really been. Victor's plan was simple, Ava continued. He wanted to destabilize the company from within, weaken my leadership, and then swoop in, claiming control of Blue Sky. All of you were part of that plan, some knowingly and some unknowingly. But now we have a choice. We can either stand by and let Victor finish what he started, or we can take a stand and reclaim this company. The room was quiet, the gravity of her words sinking in. Ava had made her case. Now it was up to the board. She knew that a few would resist, that some would still be too loyal to Victor. But she was counting on the rest of them. The ones who had stayed in the shadows, afraid to speak up, to finally find the courage to make the right choice. Finally, Jonathan Hayes spoke, his voice wavering. I didn't know the extent of it, he admitted. I trusted Victor. He always seemed to know what was best for the company. But now I see what's been going on. Ava nodded, meeting his eyes. It's not too late to make things right, Jonathan. This company needs transparency, trust, and a leader who's willing to fight for it. And that leader is me. The tension in the room was palpable. Victor's influence was crumbling, but Ava knew that the next few hours would be crucial. She had to make sure that no one would back down. Ava turned to Lena, who gave her a subtle nod. She knew what had to be done next. The press was already waiting for their statement. Victor was about to be exposed for everything he was, but she wasn't done yet. She still had a final blow to deliver. The door to the conference room opened, and Victor Crane walked in, a look of surprise and frustration on his face. He hadn't expected Ava to take charge like this. The moment had come. I knew you'd try to pull this, Victor said, his voice dripping with contempt. But it's too late. I've already called in the legal team. You're out, Ava? Ava met his gaze, her eyes hard. Not today, Victor. Today it's you who's done. Ava sat in the boardroom, the silence heavy in the air. Victor Crane had just stormed out, his face flushed with anger. She could almost hear the echo of his footsteps fading down the hallway as he retreated. Retreating from a fight he was no longer equipped to win. The room, once tense and divided, now felt different. The atmosphere was lighter, but only by a thread. The board had listened. They had seen the evidence, the financial discrepancies, the backdoor dealings, the manipulation. Ava had made her case, and most had begun to side with her. But it wasn't over. Victor was a formidable opponent, and she knew he would fight tooth and nail. He had a reputation for surviving crises, and the truth was, she wasn't convinced he'd give up so easily. I think we've done all we can for today, Lena said, her voice cutting through the silence. The media's already picked up on the statement, and we've sent everything to the legal team. Victor's threats are empty right now. He's trying to regroup, but we're ahead of him. Ava nodded slowly, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. She could feel the weight of what was coming next. They had the evidence, they had the momentum, but they needed to act fast before Victor could dig in his heels. She wasn't just fighting for her position anymore. This had become about more than that. It was about protecting Blue Sky Airlines from falling into the hands of someone like Victor, someone who would prioritize power over integrity. "I need a meeting with Jonathan Hayes," Ava said, her voice decisive. "Now." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? I mean, he's already backed you up, but he was part of this too. He's not entirely in the clear." Ava let out a sigh, her mind already racing ahead. "I don't trust anyone on that board right now. Victor has too many connections. Jonathan is the key. If he can be brought on fully, we can stabilize this company. I need to know where his loyalties really lie." Lena nodded, pulling out her phone. "I'll arrange it." As Lena made the call, Ava glanced at the pile of documents on the table. Evidence, contracts, financial records. They were pieces of a puzzle that could bring down Victor, but there was one thing that still lingered in her mind: the final play. She knew this wasn't over. Victor was going to strike back, and when he did, it would be worse than ever. She needed to stay a step ahead. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Jonathan Hayes entered, looking more nervous than she had expected. Ava stood, her gaze steady. "Have a seat," Ava said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Jonathan took the seat slowly, glancing at the table full of papers before looking back at Ava. "I know I'm not in the clear, Ava, but I want to make things right. I didn't fully understand what was happening with Victor until now." Ava studied him closely. She needed to trust him, but she also needed to know if he could be trusted with the future of the company. "What's your plan, Jonathan?" "I want to come clean to the board. Everything. I've been on the wrong side of this. I'll help expose Victor for what he's done," Jonathan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Ava let the silence stretch for a moment, watching him closely. This was the pivotal moment. She could either trust him or risk alienating another ally in her fight. "I'm in," Ava said finally, "but this has to be done right. We'll work together, expose Victor properly, and take back control of this company." Jonathan nodded, relief washing over his face. For the first time, Ava saw something genuine in his eyes, perhaps a touch of regret, or maybe even a glimmer of hope that he could redeem himself. But she knew better than to get comfortable. Victor Crane was still out there, and Jonathan's willingness to help wasn't a guarantee. Still, she had to move forward. She couldn't afford to let doubt linger. "Good," Ava said, her tone firm but measured. "I need everything from you, Jonathan, every detail, every communication with Victor, everything that links him to these transactions and the board's decisions. If you want to make this right, this is the only way." "I understand," Jonathan replied, his voice steady now. "I'll gather what I can. It's all in my email archives. I'll send it over immediately." Ava paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. She wasn't just relying on him for information. She was making him an ally. She needed him to understand the gravity of what was at stake. If they were going to survive this, they would have to work as one, and there would be no room for second-guessing. "You've got one chance to prove yourself," Ava added, her voice sharper now. "If Victor gets a whiff of any hesitation, we're done. So make sure you're in this 100%. "I will," he said, nodding fervently. "You have my word." With that, Jonathan left the room, leaving Ava to her thoughts. She knew this would be a long fight. Victor wouldn't give up easily, and neither would the loyalists he had cultivated over the years. But Ava had something Victor didn't: an unshakable resolve and the trust of the few people still standing by her. The next few hours passed in a blur. Ava and Lena worked tirelessly, preparing for the impending storm. They had gathered enough evidence, but they needed to ensure it reached the right people. The press needed to hear the truth, and the board needed to see it. This was going to be a public showdown, and Victor had no idea what was coming for him. But the clock was ticking. Ava knew Victor would retaliate soon, and when he did, he would come hard. She had to be ready to counter every move. They were about to enter the final stage of this battle, and everything would come down to how well they executed their next steps. Ava's phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Lena. "We've got a window. The board's ready for an emergency meeting tomorrow. We can move forward with the evidence, but we need to act fast before Victor can get to them first." Ava's eyes narrowed. This was it. The board was her battleground, and tomorrow would be the moment that defined the future of Blue Sky Airlines. "We go tomorrow," Ava said firmly, "and we finish this once and for all." The air in the room shifted, an electric charge running through her veins. The stakes had never been higher, but Ava was ready. She wasn't just fighting for her position anymore. She was fighting for the future of Blue Sky and everything she had built. She wasn't going to let Victor win. As the day came to an end, Ava leaned back in her chair, her mind already racing through the moves she would make the next morning. The press, the board, the legal team, they were all in place. Victor was on the defensive, but Ava knew it was only a matter of time before he would try to strike back. She wasn't going to let him, not this time. Tomorrow the final play would be made. The morning of the emergency board meeting arrived too quickly for Ava's liking. She hadn't slept much, her mind buzzing with plans, counterplans, and the looming confrontation. She stood before the mirror in her office, adjusting her blazer with a determined expression. Today was going to be make or break. There was no room for second guessing. She had done everything in her power to get to this point. The evidence was solid. The board was divided, but the truth was undeniable. Victor Crane had made a fatal mistake, underestimating her. He thought he could manipulate everyone, that his wealth and connections would carry him to victory, but he didn't know who he was up against. Ava took a deep breath as she adjusted her tie. It was time to go. As she left her office, she saw Lena waiting by the elevator, her expression resolute. "Everything set?" Ava asked, her voice low but confident. Lena nodded, checking her phone. "We've sent the documents to the press. I've briefed the legal team, and the media's already picked up on Victor's financial fraud. The pressure's on him." Ava gave a small nod, appreciating Lena's efficiency. "We need to make sure the board knows what we have. No more half measures. This has to be a public victory." Lena's eyes sparkled with determination. "I've got a few reporters lined up. Once we get through today, we'll drive the point home. Victor won't be able to escape this." Ava gave her assistant a sharp smile. "Good. Let's get this over with." The drive to the headquarters was a blur. The streets were buzzing with anticipation, but Ava kept her focus. As they arrived at the building, she could see the usual hustle and bustle of the Blue Sky Airlines offices. But it felt different today. There was an underlying tension in the air, a sense that everyone knew something big was coming. The press, the employees, even the board members. Everyone would be watching, waiting for the next move. Ava stepped out of the car and took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. She wasn't just walking into a board meeting. She was walking into the battleground that would determine the future of Blue Sky. This was her legacy, her company, her fight, and she wasn't going to let Victor steal it from her. As she entered the building, the eyes of the employees on the floor were unmistakable. Some looked at her with admiration, others with uncertainty, but Ava knew she had to stay focused. The next few hours would define everything. Inside the conference room, the board members were already seated. Jonathan Hayes was there, his expression unreadable. He was standing by her now, but Ava knew that his role was delicate. If she couldn't bring him on fully, everything could unravel. She couldn't afford any more uncertainty. "Good morning, everyone," Ava began, her voice steady as she stepped to the head of the table. "I know this has been a challenging time for all of us, but today we're going to address the issues at hand and move forward. I have evidence that will clear up the misunderstandings about the direction of this company." The board members exchanged glances, and Ava could feel the weight of their gazes. Some were skeptical, some hopeful. But one thing was certain. Today, they would see the truth. "First," Ava continued, "we need to talk about the illegal dealings that have been going on under our noses. Victor Crane has been manipulating the company's finances and undermining my leadership. We've got proof, and I'm going to show it to you." As Ava pulled out the documents, the tension in the room was palpable. The faces around the table were tight, many of them hesitant to fully accept what was about to unfold. Jonathan Hayes shifted in his seat, clearly uneasy. Ava knew he had a part to play in this drama, But she couldn't afford to show weakness now. She had to keep the pressure on. Ava placed the stack of documents on the table, making sure each board member could see the evidence clearly. She watched as their eyes skimmed over the papers, some faces tightening, others fidgeting with their pens. The weight of the truth was starting to hit them. These documents, Ava began, her voice unwavering, outline a series of illicit financial activities led by Victor Crane. He's been using his influence to siphon funds, create false accounts, and push the company into deals that were never in its best interest. I'm not here to accuse. I'm here to present the facts. She paused, letting the room digest the information. Jonathan Hayes glanced at the papers nervously, but Ava saw a shift in his posture. He wasn't backing down this time. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He knew what they had. They had the leverage now. I have been collecting these files over the last few weeks, Ava continued, and I've been working with legal and financial experts to verify everything. This isn't just about Victor's betrayal. It's about the future of Blue Sky. We've been given a chance to correct course, and we cannot afford to waste it. One of the board members, Linda Matthews, a longtime supporter of Victor, spoke up, her voice laced with skepticism. Ava, these accusations are serious. Are you certain about this? Victor has been with this company for years. Are we just supposed to take your word for it? Ava locked eyes with Linda, her expression unflinching. You don't have to take my word for it, she said, her voice steady. I've already sent these documents to the press. The media has been briefed. The public will see everything. And you will be held accountable if you let this continue. I'm offering you an opportunity to right the wrongs before this becomes an even bigger scandal. The room fell into a tense silence as the board members exchanged glances. Ava's heart raced, but she knew she couldn't falter now. The time for second-guessing had passed. It was either stand with the truth or continue to let Victor drag Blue Sky into the dirt. Jonathan Hayes finally spoke, his voice shaky but resolute. I had no idea it was this bad. I thought there were just a few missteps, but this is beyond anything I imagined. He looked at Ava, his eyes apologetic. I should have seen it sooner. Ava nodded, appreciating his acknowledgement, but not letting herself relax. We all make mistakes, Jonathan. What matters is what we do next. We can take down Victor together, or we can let him take us all down. The choice is yours. A heavy weight hung in the air as the board members processed everything. The clock was ticking. Victor was still out there plotting his next move, and Ava knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. But today he had no defense against the truth. Ava could already see the shift in the room. Some of the board members were coming around, their loyalty starting to waver. I say we vote, said Tom Richards, another board member, his voice steady. We can't let this linger any longer. Victor has made his play. It's time we make ours. Ava felt a small but significant shift in the room. Victor was losing his grip. He had underestimated Ava, and now with the evidence and the public backing, he had nowhere to hide. The vote was swift, but the impact was profound. The board had spoken. They were standing behind Ava. Victor Crane had been ousted from his position. The company was free from his manipulation, but Ava knew this was just the beginning. There would be repercussions. Victor wouldn't go down without causing more damage. As the board meeting concluded, Ava stood tall, her resolve stronger than ever. She had fought for this company, for Blue Sky, and she wasn't about to let Victor or anyone else tear it apart. This was a victory, but the real battle was just beginning. The aftermath of Victor Crane's removal from the board was a strange kind of quiet. Ava stood in her office, watching the sun dip beneath the horizon, the glowing city skyline a backdrop to the whirlwind that had just transpired. It felt almost surreal. The power dynamic had shifted so suddenly. One moment, she was fighting for her career, and the next, she was on top again, leading Blue Sky Airlines back from the brink. But Ava knew better than to let herself feel too comfortable. The battle wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. The press had already started to turn its attention toward Victor and his ousting. Headlines screamed about corporate betrayal, power plays, and the hidden corruption that had been brewing under the surface for years. For a moment, it felt like the world was watching, waiting for her to make the next move. She couldn't let the media frenzy consume her. Her phone buzzed on the desk. It was a message from Lena. "We've received intel. Victor's already got a legal team working on a counterclaim. He's not taking this lying down." Ava's lips tightened. She'd been expecting this. Victor wouldn't go down quietly. But Ava wasn't about to let him drag her or Blue Sky back into the mud. She tapped a quick reply. "I'm meeting with the team in 30. Let's stay ahead of him." Ava was already on her feet, pacing the room. She could feel the tension in her chest, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. This wasn't just about Victor anymore. This was about the future of Blue Sky. The media could spin whatever they wanted, but in the end, it was up to her to rebuild and ensure the company didn't lose its foundation. She had allies now, Lena, Jonathan Hayes, and the board members who had sided with her. But she knew Victor was a master of manipulation. He had money, connections, and a reputation for coming back stronger than ever. He wouldn't let his empire fall without a fight. The sound of heels echoed down the hallway. Ava turned just as Lena entered the room, her face focused but with a slight edge of worry. "We need to talk about what's next," Lena said, closing the door behind her. "The lawyers are ready, but there's more to this than just a corporate battle. Victor has a few tricks up his sleeve, and we need to be ready for anything." Ava leaned against her desk, taking a deep breath. "I know he's not done, but this isn't just about saving Blue Sky. It's about making sure no one can take us down again. We need to hit him where it hurts." Lena nodded. "We've already got the media on our side, but we need to keep that momentum. Victor might not have the board anymore, but he has a lot of loyalists out there, and if he starts going after our clients, it'll get messy fast." Ava stared out the window, her mind racing. She wasn't going to let Victor wreck everything she had built. He had already tried to destroy her career once. Now he was going to learn that she wasn't the same person he had once underestimated. Ava's mind was already working through their next move, calculating how best to strike before Victor could regroup. She had always known that the real battle wasn't about winning one board meeting or one media frenzy. The true challenge was maintaining control, keeping Blue Sky on track in the face of relentless adversity. "We need to push the narrative," Ava said, her voice calm but filled with authority. "Victor can spin all the lies he wants, but we have the truth. We need to get ahead of his next play. Let's make sure the press knows he's the one responsible for the mess. We need to own this story, not just as a company, but as a brand." Lena nodded, clearly on the same page. "Agreed. We'll keep the media engaged, keep dropping information. But there's something else we need to discuss, Ava." She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "The board's reaction is going to be key. Jonathan and the others are with you for now, but Victor still has influence, and we know there are a few members who might hesitate under pressure." Ava straightened, her face hardening. Victor's web of influence extended far beyond the boardroom. She had expected it, but that didn't make it any less dangerous. The next phase wasn't just about holding the line. It was about making sure the company's foundation remained unshakable. "I'll handle the board," Ava replied. "I don't care if they have doubts. They either stand with us or they don't. I've fought too hard to let a few weak links undo everything. If Victor thinks he's going to divide us, he's wrong." Lena watched her carefully before responding. "There's something else that concerns me," she said, her voice lower now. "Victor is going after our major clients. I've seen some signs of early-stage defections. If he starts pulling deals, we could lose a lot of ground quickly." Ava clenched her fists. Victor was already playing dirty, and she knew he'd stop at nothing to strike at her weaknesses. But she wouldn't let him win. "Start reaching out to our clients," Ava ordered, her tone firm. "We need to reaffirm our relationships, remind them why they're with us in the first place. I'll personally handle the larger accounts. If he wants a war, I'll give him one." Lena nodded and immediately started typing notes into her phone. Ava could feel the weight of her words, the burden of leadership settling even deeper on her shoulders. But she wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. They both knew that the coming weeks were going to be brutal. Victor wasn't just trying to tear down her company, he was trying to destroy her legacy. He couldn't have her running Blue Sky. He couldn't stand to see her succeed. But Ava wasn't just going to fight for her company. She was going to fight for everyone who had ever believed in her, everyone who had helped build Blue Sky from the ground up. Her phone buzzed again, and this time it was a call from Jonathan. She answered it immediately. "Ava, we need to talk," he said, his voice tight. "There's something happening in the financials. I think Victor may be preparing to make a move that could damage us beyond the board." Ava's heart skipped a beat. She had known Victor was dangerous, but now it was clear he was going all in. It wasn't just about Blue Sky anymore. It was about something much bigger. She was going to need to be 3 steps ahead. "Meet me in my office," Ava said. "We'll figure out what he's planning. We can't afford to wait any longer." As she hung up the phone, she turned to Lena. "We've got work to do." The sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows over the streets as Ava sat at her desk, reviewing the latest reports. The past few weeks had been a blur of meetings, negotiations, and legal battles. The war with Victor Crane and his relentless attempts to destroy her company had seemed endless. But as the day wore on, a strange sense of calm settled over her. For the first time in months, she could almost see the light at the end of the tunnel. She had fought tooth and nail to save Blue Sky Airlines, to protect everything she had built, and now it seemed the final chapter was close. She had dealt with Victor, exposed his corruption, and outsmarted him at every turn. The press was now firmly on her side, and the board was united behind her. There was only one thing left to do, to reclaim her legacy and make sure Victor couldn't do any more damage. Her phone buzzed with a message from Lena. "The legal team's ready. Victor's team is circling, but we have everything in place. It's time." Ava took a deep breath, pushing away the exhaustion that had been gnawing at her for weeks. This wasn't just about winning a corporate battle. It was about something bigger, the future of Blue Sky, and her place within it. The power dynamics in the company had shifted, but she knew that Victor's reach didn't end at the boardroom. His corruption ran deeper, and he still had a few tricks up his sleeve. But Ava wasn't afraid. She had been underestimated too many times. Victor had made the mistake of thinking she was just another corporate pawn, someone he could easily break. But he didn't realize that she was made of something much stronger. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway, followed by a knock on her door. She turned to see Lena entering, her face tense but resolute. "It's time," Lena said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Everything's in motion. Victor's team is scrambling. They're trying to rally what's left of his supporters, but they don't know we've already pulled the rug out from under them." Ava stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the city below. The skyline was a reminder of everything she had fought for. The view from this office had always been her symbol of ambition, and now it was her symbol of victory, if she could close this chapter and secure the future of Blue Sky. "Victor won't go down without a fight," Ava said quietly, her voice filled with determination. "But he's already lost. He doesn't realize it yet, but the walls are closing in. We've got him cornered. All we have to do now is push forward." Lena nodded. "The press is waiting for your statement, and the team is ready to handle Victor's legal team. This is your moment, Ava." Ava took one last look out the window, letting the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. She knew this was the final battle. Everything had led to this point. She had to be strong, not just for herself, but for everyone who had supported her. Lena, the board, and the employees of Blue Sky. This was about more than just business. This was about justice, integrity, and making sure no one, especially Victor, could ever threaten her vision again. She turned back to face Lena. "Let's do this." Ava and Lena made their way to the conference room, where the press had already assembled. The air was thick with anticipation, reporters murmuring to one another as they waited for the scheduled announcement. Ava could feel the weight of their eyes on her as she entered, every pair of them searching for a story. She straightened her back, taking a moment to collect herself before stepping to the podium. The flash of cameras was blinding, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. But she was ready. She had fought for this moment, fought for everything she believed in, and now it was time to set the record straight. She cleared her throat, and the room fell silent. "Good evening, everyone," Ava began, her voice strong and steady. "Thank you for being here today. The past few weeks have been incredibly difficult, not just for me, but for all of us at Blue Sky Airlines. We've been through a lot, but we've come out on the other side stronger than ever. And now I'm here to make it clear that Blue Sky is moving forward with integrity, transparency, and a renewed commitment to excellence." Ava paused, allowing her words to settle in. She could feel the eyes of the press on her, but she didn't waver. The storm they had all been caught in was about to pass, and she was going to make sure Victor's dark legacy was erased in the process. There's been a lot of speculation about what's been happening behind the scenes at Blue Sky, she continued. I know many of you have been waiting for answers, and I'm here to provide them. The truth is, for far too long, we've had someone at the helm who was willing to destroy this company for his own gain. Victor Crane manipulated the system, misused his power, and exploited every opportunity to line his pockets while jeopardizing the future of the company. Ava's gaze sharpened. She wasn't just speaking to the press anymore. She was speaking to every single person who had ever doubted her. This was for them, the people who had believed in her when it wasn't easy. But no longer, she said, her voice unwavering. Today I stand before you as the CEO of Blue Sky Airlines, and I can promise you this. We will rebuild. We will recover from the damage that was done, and we will make sure that Blue Sky remains a beacon of trust, innovation, and strength in the aviation industry. A ripple of applause spread through the room, but Ava wasn't done. She wasn't going to let Victor slip away from this unscathed. The press was waiting for her to drop the bomb, and now was the time. The evidence we have is clear, Ava continued, leaning forward slightly. Victor Crane and his team have been involved in a series of illegal financial dealings. We've already sent all of the pertinent information to the authorities. There will be an investigation, and he will be held accountable for his actions. The room erupted in a frenzy of questions and camera flashes, but Ava held up a hand to signal for silence. She had more to say. Let me be clear, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. This is not just about corporate malfeasance. It's about integrity. It's about leadership that puts the company and its people first, not personal gain. Victor had his chance, and now it's time for the truth to come out, and I'll make sure it does. As she finished speaking, the room went quiet for a moment. The weight of her words hung in the air, and Ava felt a surge of power course through her. She had taken back control of her company, and now the world would see her for who she truly was, a leader, a survivor, and someone who would not back down in the face of adversity. She looked out at the reporters, her expression firm. This is the future of Blue Sky Airlines, she said, and we're just getting started. The applause was louder this time. Ava stepped away from the podium, her heart pounding in her chest. She had done it. She had exposed the truth, cleared her name, and taken down Victor. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The road ahead would still be filled with challenges, but she was ready for whatever came next. As the press conference wrapped up, Lena came over to her, a smile spreading across her face. That was perfect, she said, her voice full of admiration. You've done it. We've done it. Ava's eyes softened, but her smile was brief. It's not over yet, she replied, her gaze already shifting to the future. But it's a good start. Weeks passed, and the aftermath of Victor Crane's downfall reverberated through the industry. Blue Sky Airlines was no longer a company on the edge of collapse. It was reborn, stronger and more united than ever. Ava had proven herself not just as a CEO, but as a leader who could weather the toughest storms and come out victorious. And as she stood in the boardroom, the sun rising over the horizon, she knew that no matter what came next, she was ready. Her fight wasn't just about business. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. And with that, she took a deep breath, ready for the next challenge, knowing that the best was yet to come.